Naxxramas, the iconic beacon of the Scourge and its forces. Once looming over the eastern Plaguelands, this colossal raid returns in Wrath of the Lich King to loom over us once more, but this time in Dragonblight up in Northrend. Not only has Naxxramas returned, but all the bosses and trash mobs we fought for 6 months in Classic are back as well. How did Kel'Thuzad return? And is this raid going to be the same exact raid from Classic? If not, what will be different? And are these changes good or bad? Let's get into it. Upon the defeat of Kel'Thuzad in Classic, we looted the Phylactery of Kel'Thuzad, which is pretty much like a little urn that holds his power, and this started the quest, The Fall of Kel'Thuzad. We are tasked with turning in the Phylactery to a guy in Light's Hope's chapel, Father Inigo Montoy.
My name is Inigo Montoy.
But should we give it to him? All the time and effort into killing Kel'Thuzad. All the lives lost. Gold spent on consumes. Nah, forget that. Inigo dedicated his whole life to fighting the Scourge after seeing what they did to Lordaeron. He was a member of the Brotherhood of the Light and was present at Light's Hope's chapel during the first Scourge invasion and the first assault on Naxxramas. Seems like a total Chad from his resume. However, when we go to give Inigo the Phylactery, take a look at this quest completion text. This guy is pretty much frothing at the mouth to get his hands on the Phylactery. Kinda sus. Turns out Inigo isn't the Mr. Righteous that he seemed to be. Arthas, the Lich King himself, corrupted Inigo, promising to rend the weakness from his soul. Inigo took the Phylactery to Arthas and was transformed into a Lich known as Thelzam the Duskbringer. With the safe return of the Phylactery, Kel'Thuzad is able to return to full power, and thanks to this, we get another full phase of Naxxramas raiding. If that's good or bad is a topic for a later day. So for better or worse, Naxxramas is back, but is it the same Naxxramas that we experienced in Classic? At first glance, everything looks the same. The four quarters, the central portal to Sapphiron, and Kel'Thuzad's lair, it's all there. Once you start progressing through the raid is when you'll start to notice little differences. First off, the trash. Some minor tweaks were made to the trash. Some mobs were switched out for other mobs, but overall, nothing too serious. The biggest change with trash is that overall, there is a lot less of it in the raid. While nobody ever complained about having too little trash, it is somewhat eerie walking through the outer rim of the raid where the final bosses in each wing are, and it not being full of trash. It definitely takes away from the vastness of the raid and gives more of an abandoned feeling to it. The biggest changes come with the bosses. In Classic, due to 40 people being in the raid, the bosses called for comps that just aren't possible with 10 or 25 people. Some bosses needing upwards of 8 tanks and 12 healers to complete. Trying to convert these bosses to work with either 10 or 25 people and keep the original feel of the fight was no easy task. If we head to the Plague Quarter first, Hygen and his infamous safety dance see a slight change. Since raids are much smaller, as small as 10 people, this fight would not be possible, or at least it would be a lot harder if 3 people were getting teleported to the gauntlet room throughout the fight. To deal with this issue, all Blizzard did was get rid of that part of the fight entirely, instead changing it to an easy suppression room after the fight, which leaves the only mechanic to be the safety dance. While this fight was changed, one thing that won't change, raiders dying to the safety dance, something I'm sure we're all familiar with, claiming lag or their ping as their downfall. Right after Hygen and that suppression room, we come up to Loatheb. In Classic, in my opinion, Loatheb was one of the most loathed bosses of the expansion, due to the consume sink it was designed to be. I mean, who could forget dropping mountains of gold on greater shadow protection potions just to get this boss down? It was ridiculous. Luckily, come Wrath, this boss was completely reworked. In Classic, Corrupted Mind would only let healers cast a single heal every 60 seconds, meaning that you would need 10 plus healers to even be able to attempt this fight, which is obviously not feasible in a 10-man raid or 25-man environment. So in Wrath, this changed to Necrotic Aura. This is used by Loatheb every 20 seconds and reduces healing dead by 100% for 17 seconds, giving every healer 3 seconds to heal. What this does is not only allow for less healers, it gets rid of that consume gate on this fight by allowing healers to also heal the raid, instead of only saving their one heal for the tank. Since this ability reduces healing done by 100% instead of locking casting, healers can also pre-cast heals to land right as the debuff falls off, allowing them to get even more healing in. Tanking this fight is also a lot less scary compared to Classic as well, since come Wrath, this boss as well as many others are now tauntable, which honestly makes this fight and its mechanic pretty trivial, since you can have an off tank taunt the boss if the main tank gets too low. Over in the military quarter is where we see the single biggest change needed to be made in the raid, and that was to the 4 horsemen. This quartet of horse riding foes sees a roster change in Wrath. If you've done the Death Knight introductory questline or know of it, you know that Mograine and his fellow Death Knights broke free from the Lich King's control and founded the Knights of the Aben Blade, aka the reason we're able to play Death Knights in WoW. In his place is old Baron Rivendare, our old friend from Stratholme. This fight was a gauntlet in Classic, as I'm sure we can remember, requiring 8 tanks and 12 healers, making this fight impossible in a 10 or 25 man setting. One of the hardest parts about this encounter in Classic was the pull. Trying to get every horseman in their corner was a challenge in and of itself. In Wrath, since the amount of tanks needed to do this pull just isn't feasible, this challenge is done away with as the horsemen will run to their corners as soon as the fight starts. On top of the horsemen running to their corners, Zeliek and the girl horseman, whose name I can't say so I just call her Lady B, they don't require a traditional tank, as they will just attack the closest player to them with Shadow Bolt or Holy Bolt, depending on which one you're tanking. Another mechanic affected by the lower number of tanks are the marks that each horseman casts. In Classic, every 12 seconds each horseman would cast their mark. This would hit everyone in a 60-yard radius and do more damage as it stacked, with the debuff lasting for a whopping 75 seconds. In Wrath, these marks now only have a 45-yard range and have a measly 25-second cooldown, meaning that instead of having to reset stacks in the middle of the room, the tanks and DPS groups can switch between the front 2 horses and then to the back 2 without really having to worry about stacks at all. All in all, this fight is trivial compared to the notoriety of its Classic counterpart, but it is understandable why it had to be changed in this way, because a fight like the original 4 horsemen just isn't feasible outside of a 40-man setting. There's some other small changes here and there that can be found in boss encounters throughout the raid. In the 10-man version of Instructor Resuvius, there are orbs you can click to mind control the mobs to tank him instead of needing a priest to do it. Don't worry though, priest, your favorite mechanic is still there. You'll still have to mind control the mobs in the 25-man version. Similar to Resuvius, to combat needing a priest in every 10-man run, when Grand Widow Fairlina enrages, all you need to do is kill a worshipper near her when she enrages to stop the enrage. While in 25-man, you still need to MC the worshipper and use Widow's Embrace when that happens. My personal favorite change out of all the changes they made for Wrath Naxx was that they made it so that your main tank cannot be mind controlled by Kel'Thuzad. In my opinion, I think that mind control mechanics on a boss are the worst boss mechanics and that it's terrible game design. Having KT mind control your main tank and possibly multiple off tanks at the same time in Classic Naxx was rage inducing and made zero sense as to why a main tank would ever be the target of a mind control mechanic. While not a mechanic change, the absence of frozen runes in Wrath Naxx goes hand in hand with how Saffron will be handled. In the Wrath version, frost resistance doesn't really need to be used. The damage across the board in original Wrath Naxx was pretty low, but the bigger reason for not using frost res is that healers have incredibly better toolkits this time around in the way of raid healing. In Classic, the only viable multi-person heal on this fight was chain heal, so if you were Alliance, you were fresh out of luck. These improved toolkits not only make fights like Saffron way easier, but a lot of other encounters as well that were created when classes were vastly different. Overall, this raid as a whole back in original Wrath was easy, and I mean face roll easy. Not only were mechanics changed, but the difficulty was tuned for it to be an entry level raid. Even now with the 30% damage and health buffs on the beta, this raid is still very easy. Between easier mechanics and lower difficulty, will Naxxramas be able to sustain a full phase of raiding, especially coming so soon after Classic Naxx? I don't think it will, but I also don't think that it will need to. Yes, Naxx is easy, and yes, the Classic player base does enjoy raids tuned a bit harder, but Naxx is only one part of a phase full of content. There are emblems to farm, achievements to hunt, alts to level, Winter Grasp and VOA, as well as Eye of Eternity and Obsidian Sanctum on top of Naxx. Phase 1 is chock full of content, and I see it more as a preparation phase for some of the best raiding we've ever seen in Ulduar and ICC in the coming phases. One thing a slightly increased difficulty could make interesting are the achievements in Naxxramas. There are a couple of achievements in Naxxramas that on their own will be a challenge for a lot of people to get, especially in phase 1 of Wrath. And these achievements are the ones requiring you to kill all the bosses in 10-man Naxx and 25-man Naxx without anyone dying in a single raid lockout, as well as clearing 10-man Naxx with 8 people or less, and clearing 25-man Naxx with 20 people or less. Yes, these raids are easy, but regardless of difficulty, it's no small task to kill 15 bosses without a single person dying. Going for these achievements in phase 1 will definitely help the longevity of the phase. So what's the consensus? Are you excited about entering this floating necropolis again? Let me know in the comments below. As always guys, hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the content, or stop by and say hi sometime at twitch.tv/AmeTV. That's it for me today though guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.